The Dukes of Stratosphere. Yes, they are. They are the only royalty that I will accept here. Or perhaps, if we were to go with the upper crust. Yes, the upper crust. We are finished with finishing school. The Duke Distortion, Lord Bendover. That's awesome. I love that song, The Cream of the Crust. You get the cream of the crust. You just can't get enough. Oh, man. Birdhouse inside chat's like, psychedelic, man. Good stuff from the Dukes. All right, so we're gonna go to the Iran story, and I should have gotten the straw dogs ready for young fast Iranians. But all right, so first off, Iran. Now, this is going to be a very quick transition from laughing and joking and trying to find some levity here to a very serious anniversary. It just so happens that the funeral for the Ayatollah is coinciding with one of the darkest times in contemporary Persian Iranian history. That, of course, is today. Today doesn't just mark, as Mario Nafal writes, today doesn't just mark the start of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's funeral. It's also the anniversary of one of the darkest moments of U.S.-Iran history, the day the U.S. shot down a civilian passenger plane. Because, of course, the Iranians are just bad guys. So the civilians should just get shot down. And Iran's foreign ministry isn't letting the U.S. forget it. On July 3rd, 1988, the U.S. Vincennes fired 2 missiles at Iran Air Flight 655, a scheduled commercial flight from Bandar Abbas to Dubai. All 290 people on board were killed, including 66 children. The U.S. has always called it a tragic mistake rather than a deliberate attack. Yeah, it was a mistake that your money was taken. It was a mistake that your money went into funding the arms to be created. It was a mistake that those sailors were funded with your money. It was all just it was an oversight. Sorry, didn't mean to do it. It happened during the Iran-Iraq War, with the Vincennes in the middle of a skirmish with Iranian gunboats in the Strait of Hormuz. Because, there was no declared war, so the United States definitely should have been there. The crew misidentified the climbing Airbus A300 as an Iranian F-14 in an attack dive, despite the plane flying its assigned civilian corridor. Washington never formally apologized or admitted legal liability. In 1996, it agreed to pay Iran roughly $61.8 million in compensation to the victims' families without conceding wrongdoing. Iran also points to the fact that the Vincennes commander, Captain Will Rogers III, received the Legion of Merit in 1990. Amazing. The U.S. says that was a routine end-of-tour award for his full command period, not a reward for the shoot-down. But the timing drew heavy criticism at home and abroad. 38 years on, Tehran calls it an unforgivable crime it will never forget. For much of the world, it remains a case study in how quickly things go catastrophically wrong when warships and civilian jets share the same sky. Well, it's all one sky, but you pointed out earlier, Julie, the writer, that they were civilians in a civilian route. Now let's talk about the realignment of the Middle East, which has been long coming, and it is being shown in the funeral. The realignment of the Middle East, the global South, and China and Russia, together with Iran and those nations that trade and work with Iranian people. This is the biggest state funeral gathering of international leaders and so-called representatives in the history of the modern era, likely since the birth of Jesus. Mario's got this. Over 100 countries sent delegations to Khamenei's funeral, and the guest list tells you almost everything about the new geopolitical map. Russia sent Medvedev as Putin's personal envoy, and it's possible he could become the next president. China sent senior parliamentary leadership. Pakistan's prime minister came with the army, what's that, chief of staff? Army chief in tow. Tajikistan, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Iraq, Afghanistan's Taliban deputy PM, Oman, all present. Hezbollah and Hamas delegations in the hall alongside Shia scholars from across the world, and 0 European countries, after Iran's foreign ministry explicitly told them they weren't invited because they were on the wrong side of history. This funeral is also a realignment map. Every country that showed up and at what level is a data point about where they see themselves in whatever comes after Khamenei. And that is absolutely right. The countries that sent heads of state versus special envoys versus parliamentary officials versus nobody at all. This is a complete picture of the post-war Middle East order being drawn at this very moment around a coffin in Tehran. And if you didn't see it, the coffin of his granddaughter, 14 months old, was on display as well. That one almost got me crying earlier today. She burned alive, burned to death. They mention she was in her room playing when the United States attack came. Larry Johnson has some very disturbing math to relate about the United States fumbling with this warmongering mentality when it comes to oil reserves and the Iranians controlling the strait, which they can do.
Refineries are set up to process that kind of oil. The refineries, it's not a situation where you can just take any barrel of oil in and the refineries will churn out diesel and aviation fuel. No, they are set up specifically to deal with certain types of oil, the sulfur laden. And what Trump was saying is we're going to run out. When he said we're going to run out in 4 weeks, he was not kidding. I did the calculations yesterday based on the Secretary of Energy's own numbers.
Well, how low is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as we speak, Larry?
We got 9 days left, 8 days left.
This is what you wrote last night. When you wrote it, it was 9. It's now 8.
Yeah, we're one day since then. So this will be for the production of diesel and aviation fuel. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be any produced, but we are experiencing a shortage of 20%, and without that 20% being made up, there will be a shortage of diesel and aviation fuel, and they're going to have to make choices about who's going to get who will get oil that we've devoted for aviation, who will get oil for diesel. That's why Trump said that at the G7. It is that serious, and nobody's paying attention to it.
Wow. Except you, Larry, and to your credit.
I mean, Larry has.
I just want to pause it there. There are a couple things that flow through the mind as one goes about a show like this, and kudos to all of you for inspiring these thoughts and with such great comments. One of them is, when I talked about Trump's tariffs, when I talked about, and I've got more information, I've got a comparison. Again, it's time to compare where tariff stands now, the tariff levels stand now versus January of 2025. I'm going to go into that in tonight's program just to recap on this day before Independence Day. But in addition to that, there are things that can be seen as government impediments that slow things down. And then they reach a point where they become violently interactive in a negative way in people's lives to such an extent that they're extremely dangerous and they become even more visible. And this is what we're seeing right now. And the reason I thought of it was I was while that was playing, I was looking at some of the comments. And again, I was thinking about that person who likes to give the thumbs down and so on, and how there's this weird perversion of this person extending this behavior and continuing to do it to us or maybe other people as well. And then your goodness on keeping that up. And that is an impediment to what I try to do, and maybe what you try to do, is just have a flowing conversation that is as crystallized as possible about these stories and being as open as possible on these things, coming in each night regularly with a standard procedure and trying to be as dependable as possible. And when these little impediments come in, sometimes you can incorporate them and you make them into something positive. You try to figure something out, and you and I have been able to come together and do this sort of thing where that person's nagging is not going to be that much of a problem. Okay, stop talking about that. But the lesson that really comes out of this is when they continue to rise, when that weird pathological mentality of I'm going to mess with somebody else's life comes around, and then it's backed with I'm going to mess with other people's lives without even acknowledging or recognizing that I'm messing with other people's lives, that I think that I just have the capacity and the stamp, the imprimatur to go about and do this like business as usual, then it's really dangerous, because that's what these people in Washington think. They think it's business as usual. They think that this perverse mentality that we see with people putting impediments in front of other people's lives, whether it's on this show or other people doing things or whatever it might be, a regulation on a business or something like that, they think that that's just workaday stuff. That's what they do. That's what Washington does. That's the system that needs to be managed. And perhaps they can glow and feel positive about managing it the way they want to. And then you'll see people like this complaining about us, the victims of their aggression, of their perverse, weird concepts that they can run other people's lives. And then if we speak back, the gaslighting happens. That is just messed up. And we're seeing right now, Larry crunched the numbers. Again, there's not much time left. This is not good. Diesel or jet fuel, screwed.
That's Sonar 21, which is Larry's website. But I don't know how you do this. I do a lot of writing, but I couldn't do it 7 days a week. God bless you.
It's all Ray's fault. I was trained at the CIA by people like him to do what I do.
Wow.
Good stuff. Good stuff from Larry Johnson. Okay, and let's go now into a little bit more on this information and talk to you about this massive funeral, some very, very big stuff. And I want to get your thoughts on this to let me know what you think, especially about this dark anniversary, this story about the jet, and the idea that the Russians and the Iranians can be depicted as the bad guys all the time. I'm going to show you a little bit from RT. And so here we go. Let me show you this one. And by the way, we have even more about the Ukrainian attack on Russia. But first, let's go over into the funeral and get over into that. Okay. Here's the story from RT. Iran mourns. Good coverage from these folks.
Ali Khamenei is now on public display, along with those of his slain family members, ahead of a 6-day state funeral. Religious representatives, dignitaries, military servicemen, and scholars from multiple countries have all attended the ceremony to bid farewell to the deceased leader. The funeral ceremony was delayed for more than 100 days due to the war the U.S. and Israel were waging on the country. It will finally get underway on Saturday. Now, RT Saman Kujuri has more on this.
Well, Iran is getting prepared for the largest state funeral procession for martyred and assassinated Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who was killed and assassinated on February 28, on the first day of the 40 days of U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. The ceremony, special ceremony, which is now underway at Grand Musalla of Tehran, is dedicated to political figures and personalities and dignitaries coming from different countries. You know that more than 100 countries representatives have already arrived in Tehran to pay tribute to the late Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Well, the coffin of the late Ayatollah has been put at Grand Musalla of Tehran for all the dignitaries and personal figures, as well as military officials of different countries, to pay tribute. The main ceremony will take place as of Saturday, where millions of people from different walks of life will take just to the streets, but will visit the Grand Musalla of Tehran to pay tribute, their last tribute as part of the farewell ceremony for Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei to pay.
Now, just looking at that, here's the final question I'll ask, and then we're going to go into a couple of things, a couple of final points about the economy. When Donald Trump releases his body and he kicks this mortal coil, or when Benjamin Netanyahu passes away and they have the state funerals, here's a stark difference. those will be funerals for people who clearly engaged in war crimes and genocide. Did the Ayatollah engage in that? And that's on their status level. I don't approve the state at all. But wow, this is just really something else. Now, I'm going to go into some Israel-Gaza information, talking about Netanyahu. This is something that deserves reiteration. Mehdi Hassan's got this. Very important stuff. Some of us warned that this was the goal in October 2023, but we were told it was about the hostages. It was never about the hostages. It was always about conquest and ethnic cleansing. There you go, everybody. If you want to get a screen cap of it, you can pose next to the screen and say, I was here to witness this. As yes, the yellow line of Gaza has shifted again, despite the so-called ceasefire. Since it came into effect, the IDF's effective control has expanded from 53% up to 70% of the Gaza Strip. Almost all of Gaza's population is forced into less than a third of its territory. And please remember, everybody, that as we mentioned yesterday, they are preparing a concentration camp to put them in near Rafah. Then we've got this, Hind Rajab Foundation. That's the little girl who was trapped in her car with the rest of her family dead, and she made a phone call, and then they plugged her with lead probably over 100 times, and then they attacked the ambulance crew in the early days of the genocide against Palestine, the concentrated genocide starting in October 2023. Well, the Hind Rajab Foundation and the Center for Constitutional Rights, that's CCR, not Clarence Clearwater Revival, have officially petitioned New York Attorney General Letitia James to launch a criminal investigation into Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. This legal offensive comes just days ahead of the extremist official's scheduled arrival in Manhattan for the United Nations Chiefs of Police Summit on the 7th of July and the 8th. Now, he should be arrested. If Mondami is going to be consistent about his position about war criminals, Ben-Gvir is wanted for war crimes. The advocacy group is demanding, or groups are demanding, the immediate establishment of an atrocity crimes accountability task force within the state's criminal justice division to prosecute Israeli officials for their roles in the systematic oppression of Palestinians. HRF, that's the Hind Rajab Foundation, emphasizes that New York has a legal and moral obligation to provide justice for local victims, including a U.S. Palestinian survivor of starvation and torture by Israelis, and 10 activists from the global Sumu flotillas who were personally abused by Ben-Gvir. Yes. They, of course, note his direct incitement of genocide in Gaza, and legal representatives assert there are reasonable grounds to charge the minister with at least 9 separate crimes under the New York Penal Code. What will happen? What will happen? Then we've got the 1,000-day mark. This is a major weekend for darkness. Today marks 1,000 days of genocide in Gaza. In this video, we show 10 of Israel's most well-documented crimes. They're far from the worst atrocities they committed, but together they paint a clear picture of the brutality, deception, and impunity. This is Mohammed Shehada.
Of the most well-documented, despite Israel still barring journalists from entering Gaza. But together, they paint a clear picture of Israel's brutality and deception, and the impunity that has allowed both to continue. In this video, we'll tell their stories. On March 23, 2025, a Palestinian ambulance crew disappeared in Rafah. When other rescue teams were sent to find them, they disappeared too. For a week, no one knew what happened, until rescuers found 15 bodies buried in a mass grave along their destroyed ambulances. Autopsies later found that many of the medics had been killed by gunshots to the head or chest. When Israel was asked about what happened, It said that the ambulances were moving suspiciously, that they had no headlights, no emergency lights, and that several Hamas operatives were among them. Then they found the phone of one of the medics who had been killed. He had recorded the whole attack before they killed him. The footage showed the ambulances were clearly marked. They had their headlights on, and their emergency lights were flashing. After the footage was released, Israel changed its account. It said that due to poor night visibility, the deputy commander failed to recognize the vehicles as ambulances. But it was a professional failure. But why were the medics buried in a mass grave? Israel said it was to protect their bodies from wild animals. A professional failure led to the deaths of 15 medics and first responders, many of whom had been killed by gunshots to the head or chest.
There's much, much more of that. That is a 20-minute video. I obviously recommend based on time. There's so many different things that demand people's time, but it's really worthwhile. Dropsite has re-X'd that. That comes from Muhammad Shahada, and that is Muhammad himself in the video, if you're not familiar with Muhammad's work. Now, I want to go over to Israel Exposed. This is grisly. This came out last night, and as far as I checked on it today, it has not been removed from X as far as I know. But if it does get removed from X, inside my Substack is a direct link to the website. This is really shocking stuff, but some people went through months of work to collect as many of the videos that were either shot by victims, shot by people who were reporters, or shot by some of the criminal Israeli Zionist murderers themselves to show, you got it, the website that has all of the footage that they've been able to collect from Gaza and the victims, most of whom were killed, some of whom in the video are injured. And it's a very strange sort of, it's just difficult to sort of as an observer of this, it's very strange, because the visceral nerve-ending pain, the tragedy, what can you say? So just to let you know, if you want to get this Israel Exposed link, this is here. 64,537 videos, over 17,000 photographs. And this is it. Everything has dates on them. This is just September of 2025 alone. Okay. So there are 549 pages like that with 30-second, 20-second, 1-minute long videos. Sometimes they are reporters getting killed. Sometimes they are children. But it's all there. It's all there. So if you want to know about it, it is called archivegenocide.com, archivegenocide.com. And if it gets wiped from X, I just wanted to make you aware of it tonight. And I'll repeat that a few times again, if you do want to spread the word about it so it doesn't get lost in the news cycle. So anyway, and I said, but of course, remember, if you should protest about this U.S.-generated support for genocide and international imperialism, well, you're an ingrate. Oh, yes, and how dare you? Maybe we should just send you to Iran. And Pete Hegseth joined in like Caroline Levitt because you just don't understand what Pete Hegseth is giving to you. Yeah, he slammed protesters while he was giving a speech to the National Guard in Washington. Yep. Secretary Hegseth fumed about ingrates. Ingrates. Again, it's utter gaslighting. They take your money and then they tell you you should be grateful for it. And their ingratitude, while his address to National Guard members in D.C. was drowned out by protesters on Thursday. This background noise this morning is perfect, he said. It's the sound of ingrates, of ingratitude, of people who are so blinded by ideology they can't see law and order. Ah, yes. That classic line, are we a nation of laws or a nation of men? Well, men write the laws and men interpret the laws and men don't care about the laws. So it doesn't matter. Natural law is the difference. And you give a flying F about natural law, buddy. Your whole system is based on taking money from people. And here's Pete.
Stephen, thank you very much. To everything you said, yes and amen. And General, thank you for your leadership. Attorney General, thank you for being here, for backing us up along the way. To the entire team, to the soldiers here, thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for waiting out here in the sun. I'm to blame. Sorry, I had a meeting go long. I never want to make a formation stand out any longer than it has to, because I've stood in your formation before, waiting for somebody to show up so I can get on and do my job. And that's the beautiful part about what you do. You do your job no matter what. In fact, this background noise this morning is perfect. It's the sound of ingrates, of ingratitude, of people who are so blinded by ideology, they can't see law and order and common sense in front of them. That there's nothing ideological about this group. There's nothing political about this exercise. Law and order is something all Americans deserve.
Amazing. And you're going to get it good. What a scumbag. Man. Now, let's look at the flip side of it, which the Trump people utilized to their advantage to fuel resentment against the Bidenistas, and the way that the pop media and the propaganda was oriented against Donald Trump to claim that he was tied to Russia and all that stuff, right? Let's talk about the U.S., NATO, EU, Ukraine, Russia situation.